Good afternoon. Hello. Good to have a bit of response, and welcome to the Compassionate Systems in Action at Dulwich College, Singapore, sharing event where we have our lovely guest, Jacob Martin, with us here today. Thank you so much for making time to be here despite your busy schedules, to learn more about compassionate systems and to hear from the story of learning and practice that Jacob would be sharing today. But before introducing him, let me spend a few minutes to start and setting the scene and start with a bit of context of where we are coming from. So my name is Anjali, and I'm the Director of Strategy and Programs at Catalyst Education Lab, or in short, CEL. And what CEL is basically a Hong Kong education nonprofit where our angle of serving the sector is through facilitating capacity building of teachers and the change management work that schools are enduring in. And what we do it by is connect, inspire, and ignite, really hoping to connect the diverse schools and educators together, inspiring them on what's possible, and also to ignite innovation by translating these ideas into action. And since late 2018, growing compassionate systems have been something that we see very important in our Hong Kong work. Last year was certainly a pivotal year for us in growing compassionate systems. It was really a dream come true when Peter Sangay and his team from Center for Systems Awareness came to Hong Kong physically to lead a 3-day compassionate systems training. And it was certainly amazing to see 230 participants from 80 organizations, mostly from Hong Kong, but also from Japan and other parts of China, to come spend 3 days together in this learning. And I definitely encourage you to check out the 10-minute video highlight of this training that will enable you to learn more about how the journey is. And this second milestone was actually convening this compassionate systems community of practice shortly after this May training. When we heard from participants after the training that they are keen to take compassionate systems into practice, be it in their personal and professional context, we decided to convene this group together. Those that are involved are 2 primary schools and 6 secondary schools. And despite the very diverse student population and context and challenges that they may be facing, we do believe that we all have something to learn and support each other with. Actually, we had our midterm convening last Monday, so it's halfway through this 1-year journey of experimentation. But we already see 3 areas of application that has been emerging in the exploration. One, really in exploring how compassionate systems could work on mental health, or SEL, social emotional learning for students and teachers. Second of all is that exploration in embedding it into teaching and learning, directly in a curriculum such as global citizenship, or even core subjects, teaching and learning. And the third piece is actually building that common language with school leadership team and the community in thinking about school improvement as well as leadership development. And so we are seeing some early success and great stories around how compassionate systems can truly, on one hand, develop well-being, on the other, cultivate deep thinking, and eventually helping to grow systems change that we see as compassionate at heart. And so if you're interested in hearing some of these practitioners share their journey so far, check out this 10-minute video of 2 advisors and 6 of these educators sharing their stories of learning and practice. And we do have that full event recording on this info session that we had in January. And all of these developments have, I would say, Jacob involved, and I really would say that none of this have happened without Jacob's support. It was right from the start that Jacob was on board in helping growing compassionate systems. If you look at the pictures on the left-hand side, it was actually during COVID, where we were already growing and promoting compassionate systems with our partner schools. And then Jacob and his colleague Charlotte was bold enough to virtually join in and lead some of the all-staff professional development opportunities in seeding these concepts. Jacob is also involved as a practitioner coach for the community of practice journey that I've just talked about, where in fact we just came from one of the school visits of the schools to really ponder about that actual taking it into practice. And it was actually November last year that we finally had this opportunity to visit Jacob at his school, and it's certainly amazing to see those developments all the way from kindergarten, primary, and senior school. I could certainly go on with how amazing Jacob is, but then I'm sure you'd like to hear directly from him as to how things have been manifesting. So without further ado, Jacob, please take it away.
Thank you. Are you going to drive, are you?
Yes.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Oh, just turn this on. Hi. Hi, everybody. Firstly, thank you so much for coming. I assume some of you certainly have been teaching all day. So to come to this at the end of a busy school day or leading your schools or whatever you've been doing, it's quite a big ask. So I really appreciate you being here. I'm going to, really the purpose of today is that I know for lots of people trying to grow these ideas in their schools or in their organizations, what you'd really like to see is how it works for real, how it works on the ground, what the students get experience, if you like, and that's really what I want to bring to you today. I've been privileged to be involved with Compassionate Systems from the very beginning of the project, which is now 11 years ago, and I failed pretty spectacularly in the first school that I tried to introduce it to, but I learned from my mistakes. And second school, a little bit better. Sounds good. Second school, a little bit better, and my current school, which is a school in Singapore, we've really now got quite a thriving community of compassionate systems going on. That's really what I'd like to share with you today. There is nothing special about my school. There's nothing special about me or the leaders in school. We have good teachers, just like you're good teachers. We have good leaders, just like you're good leaders. So it can be done anywhere. But I wanted to bring some of that to life for you. So a little bit about me first. So I want you to know that Hong Kong is very, very important to me. Hong Kong is my birthplace. I was born here, the British Military Hospital, in 1975. They knocked it down 6 months after I was born. I don't think because I was born there, but that's what happened. I grew up in Hong Kong for 2 or 3 years, and then I moved overseas to spend a lot of time in China and in the Soviet Union, as it was then, growing up. I did my teacher training in the UK, but before that I volunteered at some schools in Nepal, so that's my first teaching experience was here. My first class was an English class of 133 students who were all numbered according to their academic rank within the class. It was a pretty terrifying experience, but that's where I got my love of teaching fundamentally. Then, as soon as I qualified as a teacher, I moved overseas. I was desperate to get back to Hong Kong as quickly as possible. So I went to Hong Kong and I worked for the ESF for a while. So I taught at King George V School, at West Island School, and at South Island School. Then going back to Europe for a while, spent some time in Vienna, the Vienna International School, and a school in Switzerland, which I was the head of. And both of these schools are using compassionate systems. And then 6 years ago, needed to be back in Asia, hoping for Hong Kong, but the job came up in Singapore, so I moved to Dulwich College in Singapore, and I've been there now for 6 years as they're looking after that school. This is the view from my bedroom window when I was brought home as a baby. So this is Conduit Road, would you believe? So there's quite a few buildings missing from there, but you can see right across to the other side of the harbour. This is 1975. So it's great to be back in Hong Kong, and growing compassionate systems here is really important to me. So a little bit about the school in Singapore. Here it is. It's quite pretty. It's in quite a green area of Singapore. Just to give you a really quick idea, we have 3,000 children there, aged between 3 and 18. So our early years, 3 to 7-year-olds, we have about 700 of them. And then in the junior school, elementary school, we have 800, and the rest are in senior school. Now, Singapore in the international school market, it's really quite a crowded market. It's very competitive, unfortunately. I don't really enjoy it very much. But there are a number of schools in Singapore that are competing for students. And we in the marketplace are sort of seen as quite academic in nature. And the reason I raise that is because you might think that compassionate systems is somehow seen as not academic, or not about exam results, or not about whatever. Actually, we have found by growing compassionate systems, not only have we increased our academic output, but we're also attracting parents to the school for this reason. They are coming to us because of the compassionate systems work that's going on. Now, so in terms of what's happening at our school, we've had 5 years of compassionate systems growth. Check-ins. We're going to all experience the check-in in a moment, but every student in the school has some type of a check-in. Journaling and meditation or mindful practice are widely used at the college. We use the systems thinking tools in all areas of the curriculum. So you will find it in computer science in year 10, in history in year 9, you'll find it in science in year 8. You know, it's all over the school. And the purpose of our school, I thought I would share with you, because I think one of the most important things when growing compassionate systems is to figure out, where does compassionate systems fit for your school? Where does it fit in what you are trying to do? I've just come back from Fanling, and they have put it very much in a well-being space in their curriculum and what they're trying to achieve, and it works really well for them. So for us, at Dulwich in Singapore, this is our mission, our guiding statements. This is what we are trying to do. So what we're trying to do is develop global citizens. And so we have 6 guiding statements which drive our practice in that area. The 5 I want to focus on, I think many of your schools would also share these values. So well-being. We know that since the pandemic, since COVID, well-being is at the forefront of the parents' minds. It's also at the forefront of a lot of government minds. So in Hong Kong, the 4 R's program is a response to the crisis in teenage mental health in particular, but in general, mental health among our young people. So well-being, I'm sure most of the schools represented here would say that well-being is really important. Diversity, equity and inclusion is really important at my school because we have 53 nationalities. Everybody has to get along. Everyone has to work together. So an understanding of diversity, equity and inclusion is really important. The environment, of course, equally as important. We want our students to go out into the world and be active, to try and be global citizens and make the world a better place. And finally, to understand the worlds of other people and other cultures. Now, all of those put together is what we're trying to do as a school. And where Compassionate Systems fits for us is that if you use Compassionate Systems, you naturally develop global mindsets in the classroom, and you naturally develop global citizens. And so therefore, for us, it's a perfect fit. Compassionate Systems delivers what we are trying to do. So when our parents say, well, this is lovely, you've got these pretty 6 circles, isn't that great? How do you do that? Our answer is that the Compassionate Systems framework delivers on that in the classroom. So if you think about your own school, if you think about it right now, what are the key parts of the school, the key mission, the beliefs, or the values that your school holds? And where might Compassionate Systems fit in? Because when you find that hook, it's easy to bring parents on board, teachers on board, students on board. So I just wanted to share our guiding statements because that's how it's worked for us. Okay, now a really important part of Compassionate Systems is mindful practice. And so we're all going to do, I hope this isn't a surprise to you, but we're all going to do a grounding practice right now. And I will lead you through that practice. After the practice, we're going to do a journaling session. So if you do have a notebook, please take it out at this point. If you don't, you can journal by sending yourself a text message. So you can use your phone if you want to. Okay? But we'll start with the practice. Okay, so I'd like to start just by inviting you to get very comfortable in the chair. In particular, try to get your back into a position that's relaxed, but still upright. Spend some time making sure your feet are flat on the ground so you can feel the support of the ground beneath your feet, and you can feel the back of the chair against your back. And we're going to start just by listening closely to all the sounds we can hear in the room around us. Now, as we're listening, you may find it useful to close your eyes. If you're not comfortable to close your eyes, then simply hold a soft gaze just in front of where your feet are. And let's listen closely. I now invite you to bring the focus of your intention to the very, very top of your head. If we focus our attention there, how does it feel? Slowly then we draw our attention down, perhaps to your nose, cheeks. Do you feel any tightness in the skin there? Any tension around the mouth? Slowly focus on the face. If you find that your mouth is a little tight, your jaw is tight, feel free to move it around a bit. Then bring your focus a little further down. Notice your neck. We often feel pain in our neck, which may be there for you, may not. If it is, just see if it's possible to relax the neck a little. Then slowly bring your focus down to your chest. And I invite you now to recognize and to notice that you are breathing. We don't need to change our breath. We don't need to make it anything else than it is. Just notice the breath going in and out. We focus on the breath to bring us into the now and the here. Spend a few moments focused on your breath. And I invite you to draw your attention to what we call our heart space. For some of us, this can be right where our physical heart is. For others, it's more central, where we hold ideas and emotions and feelings. What is in you right now? What thoughts, what emotions are coming up in you right now? And into that space, I want you to invite somebody. Try to think back to when you were at school. Think about you, the student. Could be when you were young, maybe teenage. Whichever part of your schooling you remember clearly. And bring that person into your heart space now. That younger version of yourself. And as we hold that younger version in our heart space, I want you to wish them well. Wish them love. Wish them happiness. I invite you now to notice that around you in this room, we are all holding our younger selves in our heart space. And let's see if you can wish them all well. Wish them all love. And now we're going to try and broaden our awareness. For a moment, think of all the students here in this amazing place we call Hong Kong. Think of them all in classrooms all over. Let's try to wish them well. Let's try to make sure that they feel love. And now, as this meditation comes to a close, I invite you to gently come back into this space. If you have had your eyes closed, then feel free to open them now. And come back, arriving with us all perhaps a little more mindfully. I would now like you to do a brief journaling practice. If you have a journal, please write. That's the very, very best way to do this. If you don't have a journal with you, then something that my own Year 11 students have taught me is that you can send yourself a text message. So compose a message answering two questions. The first question is, what's moving in you right now? Are you tired, excited, interested, bored? Whatever it happens to be, what's sort of moving with you right now? Is there something stressful going on at school or on your workplace? Something you're working on? Or are you just thinking about what you're going to eat later on? So what's moving in you? That's the first question. And then of the things I've said so far about compassionate systems and global citizenship, or whatever I've spoken about, or what Anjali spoke about earlier on, is there anything in there you think, yeah, that was really important? Just write a little about that. So those are the two questions. We're just going to spend 4 minutes just journaling a little about those two things. So, the particular part of compassionate systems that we're involved in now is the system sensing, system awareness part, which is where the system is yourself. You yourself as a human being. And this is usually achieved in 3 parts: practice, which most of us have done, journaling, and then a check-in. And the check-in is what we're going to do now. It's the most simple part of compassionate systems. It's the best place to start, without any doubt. If you're trying to do compassionate systems, is the first thing you should start with, is the check-in. It's what's transformed my school more than anything else, and it's the simplest thing to do. So a check-in is a conversation. You're going to be in 3s. I would encourage you to team up with 2 other people who do not work in the same place where you do. But a check-in does have rules. It's not just a conversation. So the 2 rules are: everybody speaks in turn with no one else speaking, and that we actively listen. So if I was to take this nice table of 3 here, okay? Let's say this person was to start. Whilst this person's speaking, these 2 have one job, which is actually the most important job, which is to listen to what you're saying, to tune in to what you're saying and actively listen to what's being said there. Then when you've finished, we'll move to my friend Jerry, who I know from a previous encounter. Once Jerry's finished, moves on. Once the 3 of you have all spoken, you can just have a general chat, yeah? But it's really important that whilst each person is speaking, the others just listen. Okay, so that's the check-in, 1 person at a time like that. Try to find a 3 if possible, and we're going to have 6 minutes for the check-ins. No, we'll go a bit longer, 8 minutes. 2 or 3 minutes per person. What you're going to talk about is what's moving in you, how are you right now, How are you feeling right now? And the second question is, of what you've heard so far, has anything resonated? Now, the reason we do a check-in is because human beings seem to have forgotten how to listen to each other. I don't know if any of you have teenagers. I'm lucky enough to have 2 teenage daughters at home. And when I see them with their friends, it's hilarious because they think they're talking to each other or even listening to each other, but they are not. They have forgotten how to communicate with each other. They may be talking to one person whilst they're texting another person, and they're also talking at the same time as each other. So they're just talking at each other like that. We seem to have lost the ability to listen, which is so important for human connection. So this is an opportunity to practice that. So do follow the rules. They're not easy. For some people, you will really feel like you want to say, oh, I completely agree with you. That's exactly how I feel. I'm just hungry as well. You cannot do this. Just listen, and we go around. Okay, enjoy. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So you might be thinking to yourself, how on earth can something like that change a school of 410 teachers and 3,000 students? It does. It absolutely does. So all team meetings, so all meetings between adults from the college leadership executive team through all the subject teams, etc., all those meetings start with a check-in. And then within the schools, I'll talk about it a bit later, but the students are also involved in those check-ins. Now, here are some examples from our early years in junior school of a visual check-in. So when students arrive at school at the beginning of the day, they can, in the junior school and in early years, they can place their name on various different emotions and feelings as to how they are. This one, particularly interesting. The students themselves design their check-in system. They design their visual check-in system. And this particular class has created a series of bird's nest. And the bird's nests each represent different emotions, tired, excited, sad, angry, all of these things. And when they come in the morning, there's a little bird with their name on it. They place it into which thing. And this changes during the day. So a student can move from one to another and move their stick or whatever. So visual check-ins are used, but also the check-in, as you have just done, paired between students or as a class group, all with the same rules that you have just used yourselves. The key to the check-in, or what makes it so transformational, is that what you're doing is building a strong container. What you're doing is you're building a classroom culture or a meeting culture which is strong, welcoming, and safe. And then you can put whatever you want into that container. You can put Year 8 geography, you can put religious education, you can put well-being, you can put whatever you want into that container once you've carefully created it. And the check-in is a key way to create that safe space. So these are visual check-ins that we use, but I thought you'd want to, later on I'm going to let you hear from some students what they think about the check-in. So, if you have some way of writing this down, I would definitely write this particular tool down. So this tool is called the Mandala for Systems Change. And it is fundamentally the recipe for how we built compassionate systems in the school. So it is the sort of secret recipe for how we got things going. So there are the thing about a mandala is that it represents a whole, but it's divided into sections. For example, the yin-yang mandala represents a whole, but divided into the male and female, or whichever two aspects of the life experience that you're exploring. This mandala has 4 parts to it. And like all mandalas, including the yin-yang, there is a tension between the sections of the mandala. In the case of the Mandala for Systems Change, there is a tension between research and practice across this way. And there is also a tension between community building and capacity building. So how does it work? Well, I'm just going to quickly introduce each of the different sections. This one here is the easiest, capacity building. This is what you're familiar with. This is teaching people to do new things they couldn't do before. So teaching them how to do a check-in, or teaching them how to use a systems thinking tool, or teaching them any skill that they didn't know before. They could be a teacher going to professional development and being taught something new, or it could be a student learning something new. That's building capacity. Over here is a very often forgotten aspect, community building, which is where you're trying to build a community understanding of that new thing. So let's say it's project-based learning that you're trying to develop. Capacity building is sending teachers away on workshops where they learn about project-based learning. And you may even send some students to classes where they learn about project-based learning. That's capacity building. But of course, we know that in a school, you don't often get to send all of your teachers. Normally, you just get to send a few. So they go away, they get really, really excited about project-based learning. They come back to the school and say, right, we need to do project-based learning now. But there's a whole load of teachers who weren't at the workshop. They don't know anything about project-based learning. They know that it's what those people over there do. We need to practice getting the community ready to understand what project-based learning is, why we think it's important. So if you spend all of your time training up a certain group of teachers, then all the other teachers tend to feel that they're not in that group. They tend to feel, well, that's not me. I don't do project-based learning. Those people do project-based learning. I do something else. So you have to work with capacity building and community building together to get things to develop. Equally, this one is a fascinating one in education. Practice is actually doing stuff, doing the things you've learned how to do, doing project-based learning, doing systems thinking, actually doing the thing you've been trained to do. That's the practice bit. And research is not like formal academic research, it's simply finding out about that thing, doing some learning around it. So it's quite fascinating. I have on occasion been to educational research conferences. When you go there as a teacher, you discover the fascinating thing that nobody there has ever taught anything. So they've never been in the classroom, they've never taught students, but they're doing lots of research about education. Equally, of course, there are lots of teachers who say, I know what I'm doing, I don't need to find out how it works, just do it. I don't need to know anything more about it. So to get things to work well or develop well, you need to focus on each of the 4 aspects of the mandala. So your capacity building might be some workshops, some training, those sorts of things, getting teachers teaching other teachers how to do a check-in, that sort of thing. But you also need to get the school ready. Why are we doing this compassionate systems thing? Why is it important? That was the bit for us where I finally realized that it was actually about global citizenship for us, but it could be about something else for your schools. Equally, you've got to see, how are the students finding this? How are they experiencing it? Are they liking it? Are they learning it? Is it making their school days better? So you've got to find out what's going on. But equally, you've got to actually be doing it in your school. So what we did is we focused equally as much as possible on each of the 4 capacities of the mandala, and that's how we sort of got things to grow. So, an example, capacity building. Slowly building capacity in other people. For us, this was team teaching. It was anybody who'd been away on the workshop. There was only about 3 of us at the beginning. And what we did was somebody would come to us and say, right, I want to teach Year 5 history, and I'd really like to try out this compassionate systems thing, but I don't know exactly where to start. And I would go to their history class, teach their history class whilst they watched. so they could watch the compassionate systems happening. That was an example of capacity building. Practice, getting teachers to actually try it. Creating, I saw some wonderful examples this morning of a school that was just playful, innovative, trying new things, having a go. We got somebody from that school here with us. So getting people to have a go at it. Community building. This was probably my biggest mistake in the first two schools. Leaving the parents out. Get the parents involved. Get them to understand what you're trying to do in the school, because they will advocate for it. As soon as they know that this is about looking after the well-being of their students and making them learn better, they'll be behind you. But equally, you've got to work on the children themselves. Get them excited about it. Our best advocates, as you will see in one of the videos, are our student ambassadors, not me. Equally, allocating time for teachers to talk about their experience of trying to do compassionate systems in their lessons. So, your first moment of glory. Here is a teacher talking about the very, very first time that she started on her journey with compassionate systems.
Compassionate systems was a very new concept to me, so I was grateful when the opportunity for some collaborative work came up, and I began by observing a lesson that was taught by Jacob and Charlotte, who used the circle of connectedness as part of a curriculum lesson. This showed me how simply the compassionate systems tools can be implemented into my teaching practice, and it also reassured me that this wasn't something extra to fit into an already busy curriculum or something that meant planning would need to be started from scratch. After I observed this lesson, I then had the opportunity to reteach it with another colleague, and I taught it to a different class. It was really valuable, and it helped me to try out the new concept, but also have the comfort of another colleague there if there was something that I forgot or if there was something that I hadn't quite grasped.
So, I thought I'd just quickly share with you where we are currently, because then if you've got questions and stuff towards the end, it'll be helpful if you understand where we are. So, I thought I'd give you an idea of where we currently are in our position. So, with the adults, we have 380 academic teachers. All team meetings begin with a check-in. It's very important. Systems thinking tools. So the mandala for systems change, in particular. The ladder of connectedness, which is another tool. These are used when we are trying to plan out communication strategies or projects or curriculum change, anything like that. We will use the mandala and we'll use some of the systems thinking tools to do that planning itself. This is the key point I was talking about earlier, which is that we have found a place where it sits in our school, which is that our primary purpose is developing global citizens. This is the pedagogy that we use to do that. So we found a place for it to sit. Mindful practice session. So there is a mindful practice session for all teachers led by one of either myself or the Compassionate Systems team. This happens voluntarily on a weekly basis, but it's quite well attended. Usually 40 or so teachers will come to that. We do a lot of capacity building, so we do 2 level 1 trainings per year, which are welcome and open to everybody, including all of you, to come to. You have to get yourself to Singapore, unfortunately, but the actual price of the course is quite cheap, yeah? It's very cheap. So, and we do 1 level 2 training for staff once per year, parent workshops 3 times per year. And our parents come into school for a day to do a parent workshop on compassionate systems, and they're very well attended. So that's where we are with our adults. Early years, so we're talking here ages 3 through 7. 730 odd students. So the students of this age group will have a daily visual check-in, like checking in like I showed you on the wall. They will have that. Or they will have paired check-ins. Now the paired check-ins are in class. You might think that's impossible for a 4-year-old. It really isn't. It really isn't. Once they get used to it, you've never seen anything quite as sweet and beautiful and gorgeous as a room as big as this with 110 5-year-olds in it, checking in with each other, listening to each other. It'll bring tears to your eyes. It really will. Okay, so simplified versions of the tools. So there are 4 tools that we use in early years. They've been simplified slightly. For example, Systems Iceberg, which you're probably familiar with, has simply 3 levels. What, why, why. So there are simplified tools that they use in the early years. ComSys is the pedagogy for global citizenship. Mindful practice session is daily for them. It's usually for younger children. It's usually a heartbeat on the screen. You can get wonderful, it's called The Mindful Teacher. It's a YouTube channel. They simply can listen to the heartbeats. They can close their eyes and get themselves relaxed. They also use finger breathing like that. So they will breathe and move with their fingers. So Dux students will also do that. And we now, after the first 3 years, have a person in the school responsible for the development of compassionate systems. So, another test for Anjali. I would like to share this with you. It is a group of 3 and 4-year-olds who are using the Stock and Flow systems thinking tool, which is the one that you're going to use in a few minutes as well. So this is a group of 3 or 4-year-olds engaging with that.
We pretended that this bathtub is our classroom. And what did the teachers put into the classroom at the start of the year? We filled it up. What did we turned on the tap and we filled it up. What did we fill it up with?
Toys.
Toys. What kind of toys?
Blocks.
Blocks.
And orange. Legos.
Rocky, our classroom at the beginning of the year, when you came to Starlings, was full all the way up. And we put a bottom on that bat, the plug. And the plug was in. What's been happening? We've stopped filling up the tub because it's full. But something is happening that's making me really sad. Some people are taking our toys and taking them home. What happened? What happened? Good girl, Ellie. Good girl, Alex. Something took. And magnet tiles. And what's happening to the water? What's happening to the water? The plug has been taken out. The water's going down, down, down. Now it's only this full. We don't have as much toys anymore because children are taking them home.
One of them isn't. Okay, so there you can see this is a systems thinking tool, the Stock and Flow diagram, okay, which is the absolute, like one of the most fundamental tools in systems dynamics. So you've got a 17-year-old who could be using this at really quite a high level. But 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds can engage with that so simply. If you think of anything in a class that you're teaching, literally anything you're teaching that can increase and decrease, Stock and Flow diagram will allow students to engage with that systems thinking. And the more we get to practice it, the more naturally they think about that. And they might be thinking about that in terms of, how do I strengthen my relationship with my friend here? How do I strengthen my relationship with my mum? How do I get better at homework? Whatever it happens to be, they're using that kind of systems thinking routine in the way that they are dealing with those issues. So that's Dux. Junior school, 900 students. This is the best part of the school from a compassionate systems point of view. All students have a daily visual and paired check-in. The tools are used in the classroom 2 to 3 times per week. They are mapped into the curriculum now. They have a weekly mindful practice session. Each year group has each year group in the junior school, that's year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, each year group has one class teacher who is the Compassionate Systems lead. So they're really far ahead. They've really got to the point where it's embedded into the culture. There's also a school-wide Compassionate Systems lead for the whole junior school. Here are some junior school students just talking through some things that I thought you might enjoy.
I was a Compassionate Systems student ambassador last year, and I'm going to talk to you about the ladder of inference. But first of all, does anyone know anything about the ladder of inference?
The ladder of inference is where you jump straight to the conclusion and don't think about the information.
We're going to talk to you about the ladder of inference. This is the ladder of inference. There are many different parts to it, and we're going to go through an example right now.
So let's start with all data. So imagine you walk into the dining room. You can smell the curry. You can see your friends talking about something. You can hear that it's pizza day, and you can see another one of your friends going down to play football. Now select the data. You might select your friends talking about something. And what do you think? It might be
They're talking something bad about you?
yeah, or they're talking behind your back about that. And what do you believe? Okay, they're talking about me. Are they talking about something about me back? Like, have I done something wrong? Or have I just done something annoying? And actually, you might just sit alone for lunch. You might go tell a teacher. You might start crying and walk off to the bathroom. That's an example of how each step shows how you jump to a conclusion. And none of these steps really are that bad. It just matters on what you do.
Talk to the person next to you of what you could have done instead of jumping up to the ladder. Would anyone like to share anything? Josh?
Your friends talking about something and you think they're talking about you, you can make sure if they're talking about you or talking about something else by going up to them and asking what are they talking about.
This happened to me when I thought my friends were talking about me, but then when I asked them why, they were just planning a surprise.
How do you think you can use the ladder of inference outside of school?
Maybe you might see someone from another country and you jump up the ladder of inference and think they're like unusual or a bit different, but they might actually have a lot of things in common with you.
We should use the ladder of inference to make ourselves better people by not assuming on what we see.
So we've got some junior schools there actually using a small group check-in as well when they were actually having the conversation about the tool. But again, there's nothing special about those particular students apart from the fact that they've been exposed to the tool. They're normal students just like yours. There's nothing particularly special about them, although I love every one of them. So here's the senior school. We've got 1,400 students up there. This is the trickiest place to develop compassionate systems. The hardest nut to crack is the senior school, okay? You have lots of disadvantages in a senior school. In a junior school, one teacher probably teaches the same students most of their subjects. In early years, they probably teach all of their subjects. In a senior school, you would have maybe 6 or 7 teachers for every child in the school. So the approach has been a little bit different with the senior school. So all students have a weekly check-in, but it is online. We use a platform which is called Komodo, like the dragon. So a Komodo platform where they check in on their phone as to how they're feeling. That data goes to the class teacher or homeroom teacher, so they're aware of how they are. In some lessons, they will also have a formal check-in as well, but older students do not enjoy small group or large group check-ins particularly. They like paired check-ins. So paired check-ins for the teenagers work a lot better. The tools are used in classrooms probably 2 to 3 times a week across the various different subjects, but mostly they come across the tools in their well-being lessons. So they have 1 hour of well-being per week, and that's where they come across lots of these ideas. And in terms of me getting compassionate systems into the senior school, the well-being curriculum was the easiest way to get it into the school. So not all subjects have taken up the project equally, okay? I still have failed to convince the maths department to take on any aspect of this, but I'm still trying, okay? I managed to crack the Chinese department 9 months ago. So they're now using the tools. We're getting there. So the mindful practice session for the senior school is interesting. The students can choose not to go to their registration period. They can come to the meditation hall. They can do a meditation there and be registered there. So the students get to choose that. That happens once per week. Each that should say subject, apologies. So it's not year group. Each subject area has a teacher who is interested. There's one in science, one in humanities, one in PE. They're responsible for trying to get it into the curriculum. And they also have a school-wide compassionate systems lead who sits on their leadership team at the senior school. So I thought it might be helpful, since I know most of us here are trying to sort of grow our practice, I thought it might be helpful just to notice that certain things I kind of feel have to be the same across the school. And some things don't need to be. They can flow naturally. So in the early years, we've got these daily visual paired check-ins. In the junior school, same thing. But in the senior school, it looks differently. Because we've got this online one, it's weekly. And so it looks differently between the three schools. In the early years, we did feel that the tools themselves need to be simplified. So we've simplified the tools there. In junior school, they use the tools as they are taught at MIT, exactly the same. And in the senior school, you would find the tools used less than in the junior school, there's no doubt. So you would find less use in the senior school than you would in the junior school, and I'm okay with that. I'm all right with that.
Jacob, when you say use of the tools, do you mind giving some examples of senior school, what's more popular?
Yeah, so thank you. So the most popular tools in the senior school are behavior over time graph, which I'm going to show you a video of, hopefully in a minute. Am I? Yes, so behavior over time graph. Stock and flow diagrams, the systems iceberg is used a lot, and the ladder of inference. So those tools the ones that have really been taken on. Within the well-being curriculum and the counselling, and also when we're dealing with students who might have, how do I put it, made poor decisions, of behavioural decisions, we often use the ladder of connectedness for those students. Then there are certain subjects where things like systems archetypes are used a lot. Biology, they use systems archetypes quite a lot. Shifting the burden, diminishing terms, these sorts of systems archetypes. Then there are certain things that I feel have to be the same. The reason you're doing it in your school should be the same throughout the whole school in every subject area. There's got to be something you can find. Is it about, this is supporting the well-being of all of our children? Maybe it's that. Or this is supporting the project-based learning skills of our children. Or this is supporting systems thinking of all of our children. Something needs to be the same. And you also need to think about creating a team. So we now have a school-wide lead for ComSys in each of the schools. It needs to be just a team of people who can share ideas across the school somehow. So the school I was in this morning have done exactly that. They're all in very different parts of the school. Some are in the senior leadership team. Some are teachers in the classroom in different subject areas. A team of people who can come together to have conversations about compassionate systems. So I would like to now show you a video of some older students who have been through, I've chosen these students because they've had now nearly 6 years of compassionate systems training. They are 2 students, they're teenagers. They've been asked the following question. Think about your life in terms of risk-taking behaviors. Okay? So think about from when you were born to whatever they decide, or whatever period of time they want to run over, and think about how often you engage in risk-taking behaviors. Okay? And they're going to do a behavior over time graph, a very very simple systems thinking tool to explore that idea. I really want to concentrate on this first person because English is his 3rd language. So he finds it quite difficult to express complicated ideas in English, but if you give him a tool to work with, he's really happy. Okay. You go from birth, 8 years, 17 years. Okay, so what does it look like when you think about it?
I would say maybe at birth, like obviously a spike from being in the womb, but not really massive.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I get older, I think even like here it plateaus a little bit because my parents are kind of taking care of me and making sure that. But as they pass on more like responsibility onto me, then it decreases, but still not like how it does later. And then
what's this? You're about 5 now. Okay, so you're tying your own shoes and and you're packing
that's
your own
the
school
idea
bag.
Of risky behavior. And then at 8, maybe with toys, slightly higher. 10, maybe slightly, because getting new friends and moving into that would be year 5.
Okay.
But then as you move into year 7, and then it just really, there's like a really massive spike here.
So what are you doing there? What's that spike? Where's that
it's
big
just
increase?
Puberty, you just want to engage in risky behavior.
Okay.
I think when you're at birth, the behaviors that a baby might do or might not be inherently perceived as risky, but because they are, I guess, more weak and fragile and susceptible to disease or broken bones, anything that they do or people that they come in contact could cause injury or harm. So it starts up a little bit higher, and then as they grow and mature, it sort of decreases.
Okay, got it.
When there's the onset of puberty and stuff.
So when you say risky between 13 and 15, what were you doing that was risky between 13 and 15?
Probably. Oh, that's hard to say. Just maybe not listening to my parents or teachers and kind of letting my emotions take control and dictate my action. That when you get a job and maybe have a family or get married, you start to have more responsibilities, and I think maybe your sense of self-preservation increases.
Oh, is this a midlife crisis? Okay, so there's a sort of midlife crisis. I get it.
Yeah, maybe around the age of 50.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people it's a big wake-up call.
Okay, so I just wanted to show you that because the tool itself couldn't be any simpler. The behavior over time graph is as simple as systems thinking tool. So if you imagine any moment of your teaching where you're trying to get students to think about, for example, this is film we're analysing. We've just watched this film, and it's a thriller. So there are 3 moments in the film where it gets really, really, really tense. The film's really, really tense. Draw me a behaviour over time graph for the whole movie. Show me what that looks like, and then label it to say how do they achieve that. Or you're analysing a book, and you're saying, okay, the quality of the relationship between these 2 characters changes to a peak, and then it decreases when they get into a fight. What are the steps that are on that journey in terms of analysing that text? It is such a simple tool, and you don't need some big fancy lesson plan. You can just say, well, I'll try the behaviour over time graph with that particular lesson. It's really easy to take that first step into the classroom.
And Jacob, what do you see is the value of understanding this dynamics of time?
So fundamentally, for me, systems thinking tools, all of the simple problems that man and woman have had to deal with have pretty much been solved. Okay, we've done the wheel, yeah, we've done fire, done cooking food. Most of these are simple things. Think about the problems that we have left. All of those big, complex human challenges that are out there. The science of climate change. You think about vaccine science, you think about AI. All of these challenges are really complex. They involve multiple factors and they involve lots of human beings interacting with each other. Those skills, practicing those skills of connecting with each other as human beings and thinking deeply about the underlying systems, those are the skills that we need our students to have if they're going to be happy and successful in the world, I believe. If you think about nature, the amazing thing with nature is it's very, very complex. However, if you just leave nature alone and don't interfere with it, it tends to a good place. It tends to a place of thriving if you do that. Human systems don't tend to do that. Human systems tend to go in the other direction. So the problems that we're facing, the workplace that your students are going to go into, the challenges they will face, need this kind of complex systems thinking, but equally the relationships they need to have with each other need this kind of compassionate approach, is what I think. Thanks, Angelique. Okay, so just quickly to finish this, I would like you to think for a moment. Bringing students into compassionate systems, just right now, in your journal or on your phone or in a note app or whatever it happens to be, which small group of students springs to mind for you? How could you get this started? Is there a particular department or year group you think, that teacher, they would get this, they would try this for me? Just think for a second, which small group might you be able to work with and where might you start? Okay, just 2 minutes. Just write a note to yourself about where you might start when you go back to school. Okay, thank you. I hope you did think of somebody or some student or some person who might be the starting point. So just some key factors that I've talked about. So when you're beginning the process, I feel that team teaching and showing how it's done is a great first step. So getting somebody who is confident to help other teachers. It needs to be voluntary. It cannot be implemented, unfortunately. It can't be made to happen. It does need to be voluntary. Involve the parents and start really, really, really small. So I started with one class in year 5. That's where it began. When you get to the stage where you might be deepening practice, student leaders are absolutely essential. Students that will advocate for using the tools and how it's helped them. Putting it into the curriculum, so you need somebody who might be doing that. Connect it to the mission of the school in some way, and then slowly insist that certain things are compulsory. So the first thing we insisted on was that check-ins were the starting of every adult meeting, and then we said every child should experience a check-in at least once a week as a minimum, and we sort of slowly went from there, but only when the school was sort of ready for that. It had to grow first. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause and just see if there will be more time at the end. But if any of you have any questions to me or to Angelique, is that all right? Or to Angelique, about any aspect, and then I'll show you a little bit of evidence of what we've seen in our school, and then we'll have a play around with a tool before we all go. So any questions at this point?
Thank you so much, Jacob, for your sharing. I want to pick up on 2 points. One is you talked about a couple of departments. The maths department, I think you said, that you haven't yet been able to get them on board. Curious about why that is. Is it personality? Is it the nature of the subject or the class? That's one. And then your other point about the senior students is really difficult to get to. Is that saying that we should start compassionate system at age 3, 4, 5 and not, crack the senior students? So if you can share more of your experience, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, 2 excellent questions. No, senior school is a great place to start. And if I had my time again, I'd start in the senior school. So at the next school, I'll probably start in the senior school. Because when I say it's hard to get in there, it's because of the structure of the school. The children, no problem. They're ready for anything that helps them to deepen their understanding or make complicated things easier to understand. They're fine. They're all with it. But in the senior school, you often have examinations. You have really crowded curriculum. So you've got teachers who are teaching what they consider to be a very crowded curriculum. You also quite often have teachers, I'm afraid, with a slightly less flexible mindset about how to go about teaching. So I've been teaching chemistry for 9 years and it's worked fine, so I'm going to keep teaching in this way. So you also have that sort of idea. And I would say the other thing is that you need to create a reason for those teachers teaching in examination years to think compassionate systems is a good way to go. And that takes a little bit of time. The mindful practice side of things, when you've got teenagers who've gone through puberty, you have to do it more carefully. So if they're checking in with each other and things like that, you have to sort of start quite slowly and gently with teenagers. You can't just immediately ask them to share their feelings with each other or anything like that. It needs to be a bit more gentler. But the thing about the senior school is that's where you get student ambassadors, students who want this to happen, and that's why it's a good place to start. But it's not as easy as the junior school, where you've got a whole team of people who are constantly teaching the same 29 students, and so they can decide where they're going to put compassionate systems. If you're a senior school teacher, you might just suddenly see your class for 60 minutes, and then they're gone. So you've got to plan to use the tools more carefully. What was the first question? Yes. I haven't really told you which school I work at, have I? So let's pretend I haven't. It's personalities. That's the challenge with those departments. There are maths teachers who are using the tools, but because the subject leader is not really ready to change, therefore the department is much slower to change. So my wife, for example, is in the maths department, and she uses compassionate systems tools quite a lot. Yeah? She thinks they're wonderful, she uses them in maths. But because the leadership of the maths department aren't really supportive, it doesn't grow as it should, if I am honest. Please don't tell anybody that. I haven't shared it.
If I may jump in with the sort of junior versus secondary school, seeing the experimentation that Hong Kong schools have been embarking on is wherever you get to start, you should start. I think is the key. And also considering the Hong Kong dynamics and context, the conditions are ripe to have that sense of urgency. And I think in secondary school, where say in Singapore, where the leverage point might be in teaching and learning, the mental health aspect in secondary school in Hong Kong is something of people's attention. So I think it's a contextual matter. Yes, structurally, there are indeed, because of subject specialization, adults have certain assumptions and behaviors that might be slightly more challenging to crack. Yeah. But then I think it's not to say that hence we should lose hope that any secondary school could grow something meaningful.
No, the first 2 schools I was in were only secondary schools. This is the only all-through school that I've been the head of. Okay, any other questions? Great questions, thank you. Hi.
You might. Hello. I do agree that students are quite keen to learn as long as they see the value. So I think the most difficult thing is cracking teachers, like you said. In terms of helping teachers understand these tools, what would you say if a teacher asks you, what's in it for me? How would this help me? Because I think that's the most important questions. Unless teachers understand why it helps them, they wouldn't do it, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, great question. So, some of that is a little bit contextual to the subject. I'm talking senior school now. So you're asking about senior school, yeah. So, in history, they were particularly, what they wanted was students to collaborate better in groups to discuss topics. That's what they were looking for. And so they started using the connection circle to encourage group work between 4 or 5 students to look at a period of history. So it was a specific issue that they came to me with, saying, which of these tools do you think would encourage great group work and collaborative thinking? So I suggested the tool. But in general for senior school teachers, quite often, certainly another thing in our context is language variation. So within our classes, we have enormous variation in English. Okay, so we've got students who are native speaker through to second, third language English speakers. The thing about our systems thinking tool there is it can allow students who either have English language needs or have additional educational needs to express complex ideas using very simple diagrams. Lots of teachers really like that aspect of it. Another thing senior school teachers really enjoy about these tools is that they're wonderful as revision tools, revision aids. At the end of a topic, when students are preparing for an assessment, they are great for creating, a clearer understanding of subject matter. So quite often, it's been departments asking, can you help, how does this help them, do better in tests, is often the question.
Looking from an entirely not teaching and learning angle, we've seen in Hong Kong schools principals telling the teachers, hey, let's not think about implementation in classrooms yet. Think about taking good care of yourself. And we have experiences where we put away sort of the student sort of aspects of things, but just considering how you handle your own emotions, taking good care of self, and experiencing being listened to.
Yeah, that's a very good point. If you were to ask my teachers what's the most important thing about compassionate systems for them, they would say it's about it making the school a nicer place to work and to make them feel more heard and happier. That would be the first thing they would say. The teaching and learning aspect would be secondary to that. So they would say, oh, well, now our team meetings allow me to express my opinions. Before I was slightly quiet, so I was never heard by anybody. People would always talk over me, that sort of thing. So if you ask my teachers, they would say that first, about themselves and the culture of the school, and then maybe how it's helped them in their classroom.
Yeah. And then the second angle is using it to unpack a pressing issue that came to the school. We've heard of examples, actually, Finzi talking about like when there's a student conflict that came about. So the school is pondering about this issue and then sort of leading the team in unpacking this issue with, say, a letter of inference. And so with that experience of working through an issue together and seeing its benefits, then they would then spark ideas of how they could also apply in other aspects, be it teaching or learning or outside of it.
Yeah. So in terms of, these are the questions that I'm always asked. How do you convince parents, right? How do you convince parents or other stakeholders that this is a good thing? Well, I think the primary and the most impressive aspect of compassionate systems for me is that it is a way of really supporting the well-being of students. Singapore is the same as Hong Kong in terms of the teenage mental health crisis, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. All of these things are rampant. We're also now living in a world that's really fractured and the students see that every day in their news feeds. They are alarmed by it, they are upset by it, and they feel an enormous amount of stress. How will I get the job that will let me earn money for, to have a good life? How will I be successful when I leave school? There's a lot of anxiety around, and the news cycle and what's going on around the world does not help with that. Now, compassionate systems, the main aspect of it is this emotional well-being support of students. Now, what we have found certainly is that with our parent community, who are very, very academically focused, apparently I think Singapore parents are famous for how competitive they are about their children and academic results. They are, it's true. But if you talk about how you are deliberately trying to look after the well-being of their children, they're on side. So parents, that's a really key part of it. Examination success, we talk about the bits I've talked about already, that this really helps students to think in a way that gets them the best top grades. And then all parents are worried about this. They're all worried about their children, graduating to be happy, healthy people with healthy minds who can go out and live a long, happy life. And so the life skills aspect, the fact that once you think in this way and it becomes a habit of mind, you're more likely to be a happy individual. So they're really also happy about that. Some very quick evidence, okay? Some of you might be interested. I'll do it really quickly. This survey is what we call the PASS survey. Some of you, I know we've got a few international schools here, so they may be familiar with the PASS test. The PASS test is a survey that students take, in our case 3 times a year, which talks about how connected they feel to the school and to their learning and to their teachers. Now I've picked out 2 questions. The 2 questions, the blue line, do you feel happy and safe at school? The orange line, do you think your fellow students are kind? Question mark. So, Compassionate Systems at the college was started in 2019. Now, of course, you can see in 2021 there's a significant dip here. That was COVID. We were shut. There was a lot going on, so I can see why it might be low. But each of these dots represents the survey taken in the same year in 3 different terms. So you can see in 2020 quite a significant increase between the first time they answered the question and the second. But in general, we have noticed between 2019 and we're just about to do the 2024, all of the data together, this represents, not all of our early years do this, so it represents about 2,200 students approximately in each year. You can see a general trend towards doing well, or doing better, shall we say, in terms of those well-being markers. And then very quickly, could you move it on, Anjali? I seem to have lost control. Yeah, in terms of our exam results, I'm just going to share with you. We can't argue that Compassionate Systems has made our exam results better, but we could certainly argue that it has not made them any worse. So we have got, this is our IB diploma average down the bottom. We've got some very nice results increasing throughout the time. And if we move one more, Anjali, this is junior school maths and English. So maths on this one, PTM, PTE, here English at the bottom. So some general scores that show maths and English ability as an average across our cohort. And we have seen quite nice growth, particularly in the maths ability of students. The test does look at spatial awareness and systems thinking. So, 2 little pieces of data for you there, because Anjali told me that I had to bring some evidence or she wouldn't let me back. Okay, so we're now going to, I'm just going to end by you guys having a go. Could we have some paper on the tables? Is that all right? Yeah. So, and you're going to do this as a little team, a little table team. So, this was the tool that you saw the 3-year-olds having a go at. So I know it's late in the day, but hopefully we can do the stock and flow. So a stock and flow, incredibly easy systems thinking tool. We have a box. I'm going to draw it using the sort of official systems dynamic nomenclature. So usually it's a square box like this. Inside the square box, we place a stock. It's really important with the stock. A stock has to be able to increase and decrease. Okay? Students will often make the mistake of putting the wrong thing into the stock. Okay? And it's not something that can increase or decrease. Now, on the left-hand side, you have an arrow and a tap. The arrow and the tap on the left indicates anything which can make the stock increase on the left-hand side, and usually you can change the rate at which that thing enters the stock. On the right-hand side, we have an arrow going out, again with the tap. Anything coming out the right-hand side is what is going to decrease the stock. And what we asked students to do is to think about some kind of stock and list the factors on the left that will make the stock increase, list the factors on the right that will make the stock decrease. I'm going to ask you to do this right now. So on the table, and this is a shared stock and flow, representing probably 2 would be best, 2 or 3, otherwise it might get very, very diverse. Okay, so I'm going to put something in the stock, and I want you to think about the left hand and right hand sides. Okay, this is what I'm going to put in. Okay, so happiness. Okay, this is your own personal happiness. Okay, so for me, I might write on this side, what would increase my happiness? Time with Anjali. Okay, so that makes my happiness stock increase. Okay, so it goes on that side. And then on the right-hand side over here, I might write time with Anjali. Okay, she can be very, very demanding. Okay, so you might have the same thing on the left side and the right-hand side. Okay, but equally, for example, I might put something like air travel on this side. Okay, so air travel. Don't enjoy air travel. That generally decreases my stock of happiness. Okay, right. So find a partner, or even better, a threesome. List out what makes you happy on the left side, what increases your stock of happiness, and on the right-hand side, those things that tend to decrease it. Where would you put time with my phone? Is that left side or right side? If you're struggling to think of some, you might want to think about which side you might put exercise on. Or how about which side would you put time with my phone on? Is it the left side or is it the right side? Okay. Thank you everybody for having a go with that. Now, I guess the first question probably would be, I bet there are lots of people in this room who have very busy lives, probably maybe have children, etc., who maybe you haven't thought about what makes you happy for some time, in which case I encourage you to do that. Okay? There's a couple of examples up here. You can see this one over on this side is how to create a positive community in terms of a classroom community. The top left is growth mindset and a thriving classroom, and then we have a happiness example like you've done down here. I was wondering, is anyone brave enough to share how it was to try and fill in the stock and flow? Was there one side that you found more difficult than the other side, for example? Or any challenges?
You may tend to have a lot of things on the left, But then maybe just one thing on the right, it just drains everything. I don't know if that's your experience, but I noticed, because there's like the three of us wrote like maybe like 9 things that can, increase the flow, and we wrote, only 4 things on the right. Well, of course, we have like really hopeful and optimistic partners, but my feeling that sometimes maybe just that one thing can sometimes ruin your whole day. So I don't know if other people will share the same thing.
That's exactly right. So students will find the left-hand side genuinely easier. And there is a systems thinking reason for that. Because on the left-hand side, all you've got is add more in, you get more out. That's very simplistic thinking. The right-hand side is really quite hard. So the right-hand side is more of this thing leads to the stock decreasing. That is a complicated piece of dynamic thinking that the students are getting to practice. It is harder to fill the right side in than the left side. The more students can practice with that, the more they start to notice how to preserve things that are important, like biodiversity, for example. It's easy to put the things on the left, more of this gives me more, hooray, just keep doing it, right? But the right-hand side, where more of this thing is actually going to decrease my stock, that's what we would call negative dynamism, or a reverse loop, which the students need to understand. So it's actually quite complicated thinking on the right-hand side of the diagram. Anything else anybody found whilst filling it in that surprised you? I heard a little laughing over here, so I'm assuming something...
I just found that something that we usually do actually is on the right side. Something we keep doing, we talk about like browsing a social media. Like sometimes we spend hours on this, but when we reflect on this, it doesn't bring us any kind of happiness. It's on the right side.
Thank you. And you will also sometimes notice, as students often do, that there will be things listed on the left that are somehow connected with things on the right. Okay? So for example, in your case, lots of people have lack of time makes me unhappy. But then they also spend lots of time on social media. So they're like, oh, there's a connection between those 2 things. So it's not just that they're connected on either side of the stock and flow, they're also connected to each other. And you can then even take one of those factors and put it into the stock and flow and think about what makes your use of social media go up, what makes your use of social media go down. Do more of the one on the left, or more of the one on the right in that case. Yeah. Okay. Angeline.
Yeah, just to add on that value that I have personally experienced and witnessed, one is understanding that things are dynamic. We often feel like there's little we could do about something, but once we sort of start to break it down, we feel like we actually have a greater sense of control in knowing what are the aspects that we could actually do something about. So that agency piece, I think, is also an underlying benefit. Second of all is building that common language and understanding. I've seen in Dulwich classrooms with how do we build inclusive classrooms, and then making that commitment as a class right from the start of semester of how could we become better inclusive classrooms, and then committing to let's do more of the left side and be accountable and remind each other not to do the left side. And so that awareness of coming together and that commitment, not just for students, but for teachers, elevating teacher well-being, and if you're a leader, being open enough to have that conversation together as a community of what are the practices that we are doing that's actually draining it, and can we do something about it? I think that is also very powerful.
It is. The first thing I did with the stock and flow with adults was 2 years ago. We had some lower staff morale ratings, which is probably something to do with me. But what we did is at the beginning of the year, we had 3 days where we had all staff together, 350 of them. We did a stock and flow diagram for positive school culture, and we asked all teachers to work in groups of 3, business support staff as well. How do you create a positive school culture? What's on the left? What's on the right? you might be surprised. There are some obvious things like marking and da-da-da. Smiling. Greetings were on the left side. How easy it is to simply smile at your colleague when you walk past. That was in more stock and flows than I can tell you. Of the 300 odd stock and flows we had, smiling and greetings on the left-hand side in terms of creating a positive school culture. So it's a powerful tool. Okay, I think I need to shut up now, Anjali.
So by now, I hope you can get a glimpse of how amazing Jacob is in terms of the experience that he has communicated in the wide range of different approach and experimentations that Jacob have embarked on. And I think it's underlying a class of change management too, in the sense of it's not just bringing about compassionate systems that you need to consider the mandala of systems change, but whatever that X is, what are the things that need to be considered? Because at the end of the day, it's not change that we can drive and force, but considering how we cultivate the conditions and ensuring that after all, those changes are sustainable and long-lasting. So thank you so much for the sharing. A little bit of promo time. We do know that a lot of you might be considering joining and learning more about compassionate systems. It's May 15th to 17th this year. Peter would be physically joining us along with Tayi, and Meta, the other co-founder, will be joining virtually. A note on program tuition, we really negotiated hard on Hong Kong's educators' behalf, on your behalf, in hoping that the pricing is something that could be more affordable for Hong Kong local schools and non-profit. And as you could see, we are also encouraging people to join in teams, because we've seen time and time again participants saying leaders coming with a team, that's really where the beginning of building a common language and understanding and pondering about where best to start in the school comes from. If you are interested, here's the digital version of the info pamphlet. We also have some physical copies available. The deadline is actually Friday this week. And so if you still have any questions or considerations around the application, do let us know. And then last but not least is, we'd love to hear your feedback of what you're curious about with compassionate systems, be it further questions for Jacob that we could unpack down the road, or aspects in which we could support your learning of compassionate systems further. So please help scan the QR code on the left to share with us your feedback. And if you'd love to stay in touch, hear about any updates and information about compassionate systems, please scan the WhatsApp community link on the right. So thanks so much for coming, and hopefully you could have a nice meal today, which could increase your happiness for the day. Thank you so much, Jacob, once again. Thank you all.